So as we mentioned in the last video, the auto color functionality in Macabacus is truly a game changer. Not only can it save you enormous amounts of time in terms of formatting a financial model, but it can also be really helpful in highlighting potential areas of concern when you're doing a review or an audit of a financial model. So let's start the discussion by familiarizing ourselves with the settings that we've set up for auto color. So the settings for auto colors can be found right up here. Macabacus section of the ribbon. We're going to click Settings. Let's click Configure. Down the left-hand side here, we want to click on Colors. And then we can scroll to the bottom and we see all of the different items for the auto colors and the associated colors here, which we set up in the Macabacus Quick Start Guide course. Let's close out of this dialog box now and take a look at some of the other items to consider for auto colors. So we could head up into the Macabacus section of the ribbon again, here under Format and then Color, right down here to the Auto Color section. We can see the auto colors here that are in the cycle, but more importantly, we have the ability to auto color selection, sheet, or workbook. What we could also do here is auto color on entry. In fact, let's click on Auto Color on Entry and do a little demonstration of how it works. So if you haven't seen auto color on entry before, it is pretty cool. Check it out. Let's go over to these cells here, which are empty, and they're already formatted in black font. If we hit 777 and hit enter, it automatically turns blue. Over here, if we hit equals this cell and hit enter, that's black for a formula. And over here, if we add this cell to say 9 and hit enter, which is a partial input, it turns orange. So effectively, the moment that you hit enter, Macabacus reads the contents of the cell and changes the color accordingly. If you haven't seen that before, I hope you liked it. Now let's clean up the sheet a little bit by deleting these out. The other thing that we're going to do is pop back up into the settings here, Format, and we're going to go down to Color and down to Auto Color on Entry and click this to toggle it off. Auto color on entry can slow down the processor a little bit, so we want to keep it off by default so we can move quickly through the file. Now remember, we can auto color a selection, a sheet, or a workbook. In this case, auto coloring the sheet is going to work really well for us. So let's just hit the shortcut, Control-Alt-S, and we can see instantly all the inputs are blue and the formulas were left black. Now that may not have seemed like such a big deal because it happened so quickly, but imagine that you had a financial model that was 1,000 or 2,000 rows high, and you just were able to hit Control-Alt-S and instantly everything's auto-colored for you. It's a huge time saver. Now we're using this functionality here to expedite our formatting process, but imagine we were reviewing this model. And imagine the person that built it had a bad habit of burying hard codes in with formulas. We could pop in here like this and put a little plus 55, hit enter. And if we hit Control-Alt-S again, that instantly comes out orange, indicating to us that there's a partial input in there that we need to investigate. So let's quickly pop into this cell by hitting F2. Delete the plus 55 like that and hit Control-Alt-S and everything's auto-colored back to black. So Macabacus has flagged all of the inputs as blue, but this input over here is really a label for our years. So we may want to toggle it over to black. So we can use the blue-black toggle. So that is Control semicolon, just like that, to switch it over to black. Actually, in the next video, we're going to work on these cells right here. We're going to look at some date formatting and how Macabacus can help to save us some time. We'll see you there. Now, as we mentioned at the end of the last video, we want to use Macabacus here to improve these headings for the various periods. As you may have encountered before, custom number formats in Excel can be somewhat time consuming to set up, but recall that we set the date cycle up in the Macabacus Quick Start Guide, so we're going to put it to use here. So let's familiarize ourselves with the date cycle. If we go up into the Macabacus section of the ribbon, here under Format, we could go into Number and then down to Date. We can see right away the date cycle, date actual year and date forecast year are going to be what we're going to use in this instance. The date cycle here, shortcut comes up, Control-Shift-2. Let's escape out of this and put that shortcut to use on some of these labels. In fact, the balance sheet may be a really nice place for us to start. If we go over to the balance sheet, we can clearly see these actuals now because they've been auto-colored for us. So we're going to go to here where it says 2022 and hit Control-Shift-2 to get that appearing as an actual. For the forecast, we can highlight these and hit Control-Shift-2 twice and they appear as a forecast. So we can effectively do the same thing over here for the cash flow statement. We're going to highlight these cells, Control-Shift-2 twice for forecast. Over here to the income statement, Control-Shift-2 twice for forecast. So taking the time in the Quick Start Guide course to set those cycles up in advance is now saving us a lot of time. Now these labels look great, but what we're seeing here actually is a little redundancy that's appeared. If we have the F here on this label, then we don't need the word forecast. So what we can do is go across the top and eliminate the word forecast here on the cash flow statement, and the same thing on the balance sheet for the actual and the forecast. We can take these away. And again, what you want to remember is you don't want redundancy in formatting. If you can remove something, you should. Now, each one of these little changes and modifications may seem minor, but collectively they are going to make a huge difference in terms of the formatting of this model. And what we're also doing as we remove elements is we're taking away unnecessary items and we're making the model more clean and creating more white space. What we're going to do next in the next video is look at these headings really closely and use this opportunity to introduce some branding and some corporate colors into the top of these statements. We'll see you there. Now remember from the last video that what we want to do is focus on these headers. And the fastest and easiest way to make them really stand out is by adjusting some font sizes. So let's dive in and take a look at the font size cycle, which is going to make this operation really quick using Macabacus. So let's review the settings that we configured earlier. Up here into the format section of the ribbon, we can go down to font and over to size, and we can see the font size cycle right here. We have 8, 9, 10, and 14 loaded into the cycle. If we hover over the font size cycle here, we can also see the shortcut, Alt-Shift-G. So let's escape out and put that shortcut to use. Now, as we change the font sizes, it will be really helpful for us to see the home menu. Remember that little pro tip that we brought up earlier. In order to get the home menu visible, we're going to tap Alt and then H, which toggles the home menu, and then we can hit Escape a couple of times, and now we have the home menu showing. The advantage is that we can see the font sizes right up here really easily. So now that the home menu is showing, if we move around from cell to cell, we can see really closely right up here that everything is coming up as a font size of 10. But if we want to be absolutely sure, what we can do is we can hit Control-A to select all, and then Alt-Shift-G and start rotating through the font size cycle until we get to 10. This way we're sure that everything is now set to 10 in the financial model, at least in this sheet. So now what we really want to do is emphasize some of these headings. So down here to income statement, Alt-Shift-G, and we rotate through the cycle until we get to 14. Similarly, on the cash flow statement, we can use the same shortcut to 14, and over here for the balance sheet, also to 14. We could also take the global units marker right here and deprioritize it a little bit. So Alt-Shift-G, and we can quickly change it to a 9-point font. We also might want to switch it to italics. So Control-I quickly switches it to italics. And as we mentioned earlier, sometimes a mix of Macabacus and native Excel shortcuts is actually the fastest way to go. So right here, we can do a copy, Control-C, and over here, Control-V to paste, and again, Control-V to paste here. We can also see here, down at the bottom of the income statement, there's a footnote. May not need to be 10-point font. So let's again use Alt-Shift-G and rotate over to a 9-point font, just like that. So we've definitely been able to make some improvements on these headings here. They're much more prominent and they're really standing out on top of the financial statements at this point. But in the next video, we're going to add a nice splash of color to do a little bit of corporate branding right at the top of these three statements. We'll see you there. Now, as we mentioned, we want to do a little bit more work up here on these headings. We're going to introduce a border that's going to provide a little bit of a separation between the heading and the rest of the financial model. And what we're also going to do is add in a splash of color, which is going to be fun because it'll allow us to bring out some of our corporate brand right at the top of these financial statements. In fact, let's start off over here on the balance sheet. We can highlight across just using the Shift key and the arrow, and then Control Shift K allows us to rotate through until we get to a nice blue fill color. Now what we can do is use the blue-black toggle, which is Control semicolon once, just to switch this to a blue font. We're not really signifying that it's an input. We're just introducing some of our corporate colors right there at the top for branding purposes. Now let's bring our attention over here to these labels. Recall that we added the A for actual and the F for forecast, but it can be kind of difficult at first glance to discern between the A and the F. So we can actually use some borders here to help us differentiate between the actuals and the forecast period. So if we go into this cell and highlight across, Control-Alt-Shift down 3 times will put in a strong bottom border for us. So what we want to do next is move across, and we're going to only select the forecast period and then Control-Alt-Shift up twice, and what we get is a nice thin border over that forecast period. So what you can see now is a slight visual difference in these borders for the actual period compared to the forecast period, which might be helpful for the reader just to differentiate between the two. Now remember, with Macabacus, not only is it easy to put in different border types, but we can also easily change the border color. Let's just refresh our memory in terms of what settings that we've configured in the software. So let's head up here to the Macabacus section of the ribbon, over to Format, and under Color, we can see here Border Colors. We've loaded in a blue and an orange, and we can see the border color cycle shortcut coming up right here. Control-Alt-Shift single quote. So let's escape out and try this shortcut. So let's highlight right across all these periods and Control-Alt-Shift single quote, and we can see we switched the border color to blue. So let's summarize some of these changes that we've made to the balance sheet. The first thing is that we have a really nice line here that separates the headings from the financial statement that's below. Also, we've separated the actuals and the forecast by using these borders. And finally, we've introduced a really nice splash of corporate colors into the headings of the financial statements. In the next video, we're going to show you a really neat tip that you can use to make these changes quickly on the cash flow statement and the income statement. We'll see you there.